Stiamo terminando l'anno in cui abbiamo approfondito il tema della missione.
We are coming to the end of the year in which we have deepened the theme of mission, our outreach, that we entitled We Are Called and We Are Sent. It is difficult to sum up the thousands of amazing experiences that God has let us live throughout the world. I'm thinking, for example, of some focolares that have opened in unimaginable places. In the Brazilian Amazon rainforest, in Lampedusa and Ventimiglia, Italy, where hundreds of migrants received their initial welcome. In Turkey, in Iskenderun, the region which was struck by the earthquake in 2023. It's impossible to mention all the projects of peace and aid that have been started or are going ahead in countries at war or in other countries where people are suffering because of poverty or because they have been affected by environmental disasters. Each one of us could recount how we are trying to adhere more to the call of God, who is sending us to announce His love and to respond to the ever-new cry of Jesus forsaken. The Gemfest and the many relationships that have been established with people and organizations in Brazil and through the other 44 Genfests in the world are a beautiful example of this. We have also recently concluded the second session of the 16th Ordinary General Assembly of the Synod of Bishops. It had the title, For a Synodal Church, Communion, Participation, Mission. I participated as a special invitee, and as I've already been able to update on various occasions, it was a rich and intense experience. This now makes us responsible for putting into practice all that we have learned and understood in these 3 years on the synodal process, and through the various important realities which have been included in the final document and which I invite you all to study. For all of this, and much more that we have not mentioned, let's first of all thank God for what He has done, and let us ask for His support in all the challenges we are facing. I'm grateful to each and every one of you for your many creative and very concrete responses to the call to contribute to bringing into the world the new culture which is born from the gospel and which certainly does not end with the conclusion of this year. Now let's enter even more into the heart of this call that is founded on fraternity and has within it the potential to heal the most serious wounds of individuals, groups and peoples, such as loneliness, indifference, inequalities, wars. This is why I have chosen to deepen the theme Closeness. And I want to entitle this talk, Who are you for me? This question seemed fundamental to me. Who is the person that I am approaching? A relative? A friend? A brother or sister? An enemy? And what is my attitude towards him or her? I found a first answer in a passage from Chiara's diary in which she wrote, quoting the New Commandment, "This is how all will know you for my disciples, your love for one another." Your love for one another. Therefore, when this element is missing from our hearts and souls, they will not know us. How many times we let ourselves get caught up in many things, good things too, that concern the Focolare and the Church, yet we do these things without loving the person who is living right next to us. But this and this alone is Christianity. Our special vocation is to emphasize this. It is the revolution that we have to bring.
La rivoluzione che dobbiamo portare.
Chiara says our special vocation, the revolution we have to bring, is to have love for the person who lives next to us. And that's why I ask myself, what is the contribution that the charism of unity can bring? Certainly, it is important to be there for others, to help them, to support them. But perhaps this is not enough. Or at times we feel satisfied because of the good we try to do. And this can happen on a personal level, but also on a social level when, for example, the motive that drives us conceals a subtle, egoistic feeling to show others how good we are. Closeness is a central concept for the Christian world, and this always leads to a deep union with God, as Pope Shenouda III of the Coptic Orthodox Church explains. He says, if you want to love God, start first by loving your neighbors. Serve them, help them, respect them. Give all of yourselves to them. Then you will find that God's love has spontaneously entered your heart. In the Catholic Lutheran Joint Declaration, signed in Lund, Sweden in 2016, we see how nearness, closeness, is a true calling that has the strength to defeat the evils of the world. And I quote, God summons us to be close to all those who yearn for dignity, justice, peace, and reconciliation. Today, in particular, we raise our voices for an end to the violence and extremism which affect so many countries and communities, and countless sisters and brothers in Christ. Also, the great religious traditions underline the richness of the many expressions of closeness. Here, I'll offer you a few insights, which can then be deepened further. In the Jewish tradition, the biblical verse, love your neighbor as yourself, is often highlighted. Closeness is sometimes explicitly connected also to the presence of God. In Islam, there are numerous references to the love, mercy that God gives to and asks from believers, like the verse from the Quran, where God tells the prophet, "For this I demand of you no recompense. I ask you only to love your kindred." In Confucianism, in Buddhism, and in Hinduism, benevolence, compassion, and the presence of God in every being are at the basis of closeness. In the indigenous religions, the concept of closeness is expressed in the communitarian practices, the respect for the earth and for the ancestors, and in mutual cooperation. Some friends of no religious affiliation have enriched my understanding of closeness with their contributions. One of them expressed herself in this way. Closeness means sharing in our fragile and limited common human condition with other people in the world. Therefore, we should look at each other with compassion and mercy. According to her, closeness is more than proximity and solidarity because It's a personal quest for hope.
Personale di speranza. Ho voluto chiedere soprattutto
This time, I wanted to ask especially the young people, the teenagers, and the little children of our movement what closeness means for them. You can't imagine how many responded, from many parts of the world, from different cultures and religions.
Un ragazzo del Burundi mi ha detto
A boy from Burundi told me that for him it means being aware of what the other person needs. For another, from Salvador, it means helping those next to us.
Prossimità
Closeness means listening, is what a young person told me. We seek it and we want to give it, because it is the hardest thing to find. We need spaces without judgment, where we feel listened to and where we can freely open up to one another.
Con libertà.
Others stressed that as young people, they need adults, and that closeness bridges the generation gap.
Il gap generazionale. Lina dell'Algeria
Lina from Algeria recounts that she went to a home for the elderly to keep some people company. This was a great enrichment for her, which enabled her to go beyond her preconceived ideas.
For Marianne,
a Brazilian who works in digital marketing, the art of loving is the basis of closeness. She defines this approach as gospel-based marketing, which means communicating God to all, because deep down, everyone is thirsting for Him. And another young person said, the first step in getting to know my neighbors is to accept the challenge to get close to them, to really understand how to have a good relationship, because in him, in her, there is God. I think that all of this brings about a very interesting perspective to begin a process of closeness. In some of Chiara's texts, drawing close to one's neighbor begins with how you look at them, as she explains in this passage. In however many neighbors you meet throughout your day, from morning to night, in all of them see Jesus. If your eye is simple, the one who looks through it is God. And God is love, and love seeks to unite by winning over. How many people, in error, look at human beings and things in order to possess them? It may be a look of selfishness or of envy, but whatever the case, it is one of sin. Or people may look within to possess themselves, so as to be possessive of their own souls, and their faces are lifeless, because they are bored or worried. The soul, because it is an image of God, is love, and love that turns in on itself is like a flame that, because it is not fed, dies out. Look outside yourself, not in yourself, not in things, not in persons. Look at God outside yourself and unite yourself to Him. Look at every neighbor then with love, and love means to give. A gift, moreover, calls for a gift, and you will be loved in return. Here we see that Chiara's understanding of closeness is dynamic. She tells us how our gaze towards the other must be, a gaze of love, clear and pure, able to discover the divine in others, their true being. This requires a complete openness, a welcome without reservations. But such a dynamism, which aims at the maximum fulfillment of the other, cannot fail to have an effect on me too. It will lead me to break out of my personal projects to love in a more creative way, and thus I'll make space for the divine also in me. So it will be a continuous movement from God in me to God in the other, and so He will dwell in our midst. Francesco, an Italian teenager, used 4 words. He told me that to be close to someone, we need to lift up the heart of the other. Lift up the heart. This expression is very beautiful. Francesco told me that precisely when we try to be close to someone who is discouraged or suffering, love is rekindled in them. They rediscover their self-esteem and they feel encouraged not to give up, even in the midst of difficulties. He also said to me, if you don't have good advice to give, it's better not to give it. So, it is God. It's God who is alive in us because of our relationship with Him, who makes Himself close to Himself, alive in the other person, even if at times hidden. The first closeness, then, is that which our soul lives and experiences when in contact with God, and it is He, then, who gives Himself to our neighbors. This is why there are infinite ways to live and practice closeness, because the neighbors we approach require a personal and not a standard love. There is, however, a single logic that underlies our actions, and we find it in the Holy Scriptures. It is love. I have found that the most representative example of closeness in the Gospel is the parable of the Good Samaritan. To answer the question of the scribe who asked, "Who is my neighbor?" Jesus tells the story of the man who went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. This parable can be analyzed from many points of view, but I would like to highlight the attitude of the Samaritan towards the man who had been attacked by the robbers. He knew nothing about him. He was a stranger to him. He even belonged to another nation, with different religious and cultural traditions. In Jesus' story, there is a first important message. The one who was most distant became the neighbor. Why? Because the Samaritan had looked at him, wounded in his very being. He was a man, a human being like himself. This is the heart of Christian humanism, a specific vision of the person and of relationships that has changed the world profoundly. In this parable, we find, even for today, the foundations of social life, the recognition of human rights, of the infinite dignity of every person. However, there is also a second message in this parable, which is that the logic of natural bonds can be overcome, or rather, can be extended. In regard to this, Cardinal Carlo Maria Martini affirmed that one becomes a neighbor. A neighbor is not someone who already has a relationship of blood, race, business, or psychological affinity with me. I myself become a neighbor in the act in which, in front of a person, even in front of a stranger or an enemy, I decide to take a step that brings me closer, that brings me nearer.
che mi approssima.
So the category of neighbor surpasses that of physical closeness, because common humanity is the only valid criterion for helping a person. In fact, at the root of this evangelical revolution is the principle of universal fraternity. Once we have concretely experienced closeness, we discover that every person has a right to it. No one can be excluded. The us extends until it becomes everyone. But then we can ask ourselves, what do we do when circumstances prevent us from being close to a person who is suffering or is in need? Chiara says that when we cannot do anything, I quote, I will concentrate on doing well what God wants from me in the present. God will take care of the rest. He will comfort the suffering and show a way out of that unexpected situation. This mutual trust works miracles. We will realize that another has accomplished what we could not do, and that he has done it far better than we could have. A young Korean woman told me that she had tried to help a teenager who was not from her culture and whom she did not know well. Yet, even though she did not know what to do to help, she took courage to at least try. Surprisingly, she noticed that by offering that help, she found that she herself was healed in her inner wounds. Closeness, then, is a very concrete aspect of love and involves commitment, perseverance, and a sense of personal and social responsibility. In this age, where, thanks to technology and social networking, we are always more connected, loneliness and indifference have become the most widespread ills, to such an extent that there is the risk of destroying our social ties. Instead, closeness can be seen as the truest and most real form of linking up with others. So, how can I be close? Besides all that I have already highlighted, I would like to leave you some key points, but each of you could find other words to help you to live closeness. Taking the first step. Sometimes it is enough just to ask, how are you? For the other person to feel looked at and valued. Listening and participating in silence can touch someone more than many words. Don't economize on the time we dedicate to others. Take on board the other's suffering. Make it our own. I would like to conclude with an excerpt taken from the Apostolic Exhortation Evangelii Gaudium, which I think summarizes well the great richness of closeness. Pope Francis writes, beginning with a quote of Benedict XVI. Closing our eyes to our neighbor also blinds us to God. And love, in the end, is the only light which can always illuminate a world grown dim and gives us the courage needed to keep living and working. When we live out a spirituality of drawing nearer to others and seeking their welfare, our hearts are opened wide to the Lord's greatest and most beautiful gifts. So, it's worth living closeness and welcoming with hope the Jubilee year that is about to begin. I infinitely thank all those, and there are many, who contributed to my reflection, and thank you to you all for your listening and your closeness.
E della vostra prossimità.